You know in a movie where you'll sometimes get a scene like this, where Brad Pitt, like, takes a break in the climax of the movie to stoically drink a Pepsi front and center with a Pepsi vending machine in the background? Well, this is what the movie industry likes to call a product placement, where a company pays the movie makers to put their product somewhere in the movie. Sometimes it's super unsubtle, like, you know, Brad Pitt drinking a Pepsi, but usually it's a bit more subtle than that. Like how James Bond always drives an Aston Martin, or Reese's Pieces being used to lure E.T. out of the woods. This is incredibly common in movies, but fortunately for me, I don't really care about movies. I care about video games. Clearly the superior art form, right? And in video games, we would never, ever have anything as sleazy as this, right? Video games, we're just so far above. Hang on a minute, is that Norman Reedus drinking a fucking Monster Energy? Turns out video games are not above this kind of marketing, and it's a whole lot more common than you'd like to think. You see, there's 4 key ways that a video game makes money. Method number 1 is just selling your game for $60, a method that is as old as video games themselves. Then there's microtransactions. Skins, loot boxes, battle passes, you name it. These are everywhere. Then there's what's called incentivized behavior. This one you might not be as familiar with, but it's that one thing mobile games do sometimes where they give you free extra lives or free in-game currency in exchange for you watching an advert. This basically never happens in like regular console or PC games, but it happens all the time in free mobile games. And then the 4th and final way a game makes money is by allowing brands to pay for the privilege of showing up inside the game somewhere, otherwise known as product placement. Now, you might think product placement in games is super rare, but it's actually way more common than you might think. And to find the perfect example, you have to look no further than one of the most popular video games of all time. Fortnite. Because yeah, huge crossover events in Fortnite, such as Fortnite Endgame, are just really complicated forms of product placement. Fortnite pays Disney to use Marvel characters in their game, and Fortnite gets to keep all of the revenue generated by this crossover. And then Disney gets to have Thor and Korg play Fortnite in Avengers Endgame.
Thor, he's back. That kid on the TV just called me a dickhead again.
Noob master.
Calling this product placement might feel weird to you, but that's basically exactly what it is. And the reason you don't hear anyone call it product placement or complain about it in any way is simply because people enjoy it. People want to play as cool, famous superheroes in their Fortnite matches. So they are happy to accept their game being turned into a Marvel advertisement for just a little while. As long as they can crank 90s in Fortnite while playing as Goku, they don't really care what the crossover entails. Crossovers are the modern version of product placement in games, but the age-old classic style of product placement also exists. My favourite example of which has to be Dole Fruit Company having product placement in Super Monkey Ball. They're monkeys, and they eat bananas, so there's banana collectibles all over every single level. So why not have those bananas have a Dole logo on them all? It's just free real estate, and maybe the association with the cute monkeys in the Funny Monkey game will make everybody forget that Dole was formerly known as Standard Fruit, one of 2 companies that had so much money and power in the early 20th century that they hired a mercenary army to overthrow the government of Honduras. This is a real story, look it up. You will never look at these funny monkeys the same way ever again. But overthrowing governments aside, this is actually a really good product placement, mostly because it feels natural. The association with monkeys and bananas and stuff makes it feel like the brand makes sense to feature in the game. It's organic, so players accept it. Organic, like delicious Dole bananas. This video is sponsored by the Dole, like Hot Wheels cars in Rocket League, or skating brands showing up in Tony Hawk games, or even some goofier ones like Mercedes-Benz having cars in Mario Kart. Despite being an advertisement, it doesn't feel like an advertisement because it makes sense for the game. Okay, I guess this one slightly feels like an ad, actually, but you get the idea. But there are definitely product placements that show up that are a whole lot less seamless. Like how Obama had 2008 presidential campaign billboards in Burnout Paradise. apparently. I've just always wondered if this advert actually worked on anyone. Like, I'd just love to know if any median voters were convinced to vote for Obama by the Burnout Paradise billboards. There was also a day one paid DLC for the game SimCity that added a Nissan Leaf charging station. And this building was insanely pay to win. It was super cheap to build and it radiated out like pure joy to all of your citizens all the time. Literally a pay to win DLC in a single player video game. Although SimCity is made by EA, so that explains it quite nicely, really. There's also this Monster Energy ad in Death Stranding, where Norman Reedus himself kicks back and drinks this can of Monster like his life depends on it. This one isn't actually too bad, really. It's just so unsubtle. This just screams like this is an advertisement. We are being paid to have Norman Reedus drink a can of Monster. This video game is sponsored by Monster Energy. But the trick is, these product placements don't have to make sense for the brand at all, as long as you make them small enough. Like Alan Wake having Energizer batteries and Verizon billboards. There's not a single person on the planet who cares about this positively or negatively whatsoever. There's also these ads that you find inside of pro games like League of Legends. Like, there's a MasterCard logo in the map, in the video game, in League of Legends. But the reason nobody complains about it is because these only show up in pro play. Regular players never see this in-game. They only see it on live streams of World Championships. This is basically the video game equivalent of those banners you see at the side of football matches advertising like electric cars or whatever. And pretty much every major esport does this, just the same way that every regular sport does. It's very common. And staying on the topic of League of Legends, there's also a Kiana skin where she's wearing a Louis Vuitton outfit. Again, this makes absolutely no sense for League of Legends, but it's one skin for one character, so nobody really cared at all. It's not like Kiana wearing Louis Vuitton is any more ridiculous than, like, this skin costing $500. Product placement in games has existed for years and is still very prevalent today. But there's a type of in-game advertising that hasn't really existed for over a decade by now, and that is the branded video games, where a company pays a developer to make them a game from the ground up that is entirely themed around whatever brand is paying the dev. The most famous example of this is, of course, this one is kind of a banger, actually, like a bit of a hidden gem, but there's a ton of these out there that exist. There's a McKids game for the NES that's McDonald's themed, and a Cool Spot game for the SNES that is 7-Up themed. There was also that Doritos Crash Course Xbox Live game. I remember playing this one as a kid. This one, like, slaps. And there's also a Burger King game called Sneak King, where the Burger King from Burger King sneaks around and delivers burgers to people because, yeah, fuck it. Like, why not? These branded games were really common in the 2000s, but they sort of fell out of favour, mostly because they're not the best way to advertise. Instead of making their own game, a brand can just buy one of these sorts of ads in someone else's game. And it's significantly cheaper and requires way less creativity, and it gets them just as much return on their investment. Although, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we, like, brought these back? Like, where's the Pizza Hut branded Dark Souls game? Or a Tesla themed racing game where there's a 50% chance the car just explodes whenever you press a button. But sadly, these branded games are probably not gonna happen. Because if Tesla did want to do marketing in the gaming industry, they wouldn't need to make the world's worst racing game. They could just instead, I don't know, get Epic Games to put the Cybertruck in Fortnite. Yeah, this is real. It's actually happening in the world we live in. Although fortunately, the entirety of the internet is all in unanimous agreement to hardcore troll anybody they see using this car. So that's good. That's a good sign. Silver linings and stuff. The video game industry is larger than it's ever been before, and it takes up more and more of a percentage of the entertainment industry as time goes on. In terms of sheer revenue earned, the gaming industry is the second biggest media industry in the world. It's almost double the size of both the music and movie industry, combined. Video games make an obscene amount of money, and the larger the industry gets, the more desirable it becomes to somehow fit ads into games. And all of what we've just talked about is an example of that. But there's one last form of advertisement in gaming that goes mostly unmentioned, and that is the rise of video game adaptations. Because yeah, this too is an ad, despite how weird it might feel to call it one. The gaming company wins because they get to attract a brand new audience to their game, and they also hype up their existing audience to make them potentially spend more money on skins and stuff. And Netflix wins because they get to tap into the ever-growing popularity of the gaming market, attracting tons of potential viewers that may have never watched Netflix otherwise. And the better the adaptation, the better the advertisement. Back in the olden days, when gaming hadn't reached mainstream popularity yet, video game adaptations were typically pretty garbage, because the attitude behind making them was entirely different. The director would buy the rights to the brand for cheap, and then make the movie on as low as a budget as they possibly could. And because the movie had Mortal Kombat in the title, all of the Mortal Kombat fans would go and watch it, despite the fact that the people who made the movie had no intention of actually making a faithful adaptation. It was a super easy way to get a guaranteed audience to a movie, regardless of how garbage it was, and regardless of how much money it cost to make. But nowadays, making a bad adaptation just makes fans angry, and people figured out that in the long run, you actually make more money by making an adaptation that is both faithful and high quality. And as an advertisement, a good adaptation works much better than a bad one for both the movie company and the games company. You even see people watching these shows who have never even considered touching the game in their lives, which in Arcane's example is probably a good thing, really. Like, you're saving yourself a lot of mental anguish by not playing this. But you know, the funniest part of all of this to me is that when you ask people who play games regularly what they think about ads in games, they all unanimously agree that it would be terrible. That advertising has no place in video games. It would ruin the medium. And the reason they say that is because when they think of advertisement in games, they think of this stuff. Ubisoft inserting pop-up ads into Assassin's Creed, or EA's CEO Andrew Wilson talking about dynamic ad insertion in games. This sort of thing is vehemently hated by basically everyone, and for good reason. We already pay for the game itself, and we pay for microtransactions too. So why do gaming companies need more revenue opportunities in an industry that already dwarfs other entertainment industries by orders of magnitude? This style of advertisement absolutely deserves all of the hatred it receives. But when players say that advertising has no place in gaming, what they fail to realize is that it's always been here. It's been here for years, and in many instances, people actually like it. The only difference is that these types of ads are intentionally unintrusive. They hide in plain sight, because more traditional forms of advertising just wouldn't go down well with the players. And I'm sure that I speak for us all when I say that I hope advertising in video games stays the way it is now. Keep the product placement, keep the Fortnite crossovers, and keep the video game adaptations, because the potential alternative form of advertising would just be so much worse. Thanks for watching.